Well, hello everyone. Welcome to week 4 in Chile. My name is Zotomo, and I'm joined as always by Calamity. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, Chile is a really fascinating country for Geoguessr, long and narrow, with very distinct regions, which means while east to west can be a bit tricky to figure out, the north-south angle is pretty nicely given to you by the geography and whatnot. It definitely will be an interesting challenge for our drivers and see how they all did. So let's just jump right in here and look at those locations for our feature race, and they were quite diverse. Calamity, as we can see, given how long the country is, I had to split up the little graphic here. So we'll start off in round number 1. We were just north of Vina del Mar on the coast in a little suburb.
Yeah, not the most difficult location to sort of generally find in the sense that, you know, you can figure out it's Viña del Mar without too many problems if you found the right signs. But pinpointing that location was very challenging because it
Mm.
wasn't really in a very obvious place, so to say. It was kind of not even really in Viña del Mar, but in like a different town somewhere a bit to the north and very far up. Well, not really into the mountains, but in sort of into the hills over there. So in the end, only I think one person managed, no, two people actually managed to 5K round one. Not a lot of points were lost there for most people, but yeah, not a very easy location to pinpoint.
Mhm. A bit tricky indeed, but at least I think most drivers were able to get in the general vicinity of it, given that there were enough clues for us being not too far from the town. Round 2 saw us head a little bit further south, very distinct region, very noticeable on the 7, and there were a few nice signs pointing to the town. So put those two together, and there's not too many places to look.
Yeah, especially if you went south as well, you would have made your way into the town, and there's plenty of information there. Generally, not the most built up region of Chile in terms of, hey, there's one road going through there. Where am I going to look for a town? Um, I don't know actually how much you would have seen if you went north, but
Mhm.
considering the town was pretty close to the south, even, if you traveled 2 minutes to the north, you probably still would have made it to the town if you then turned around. But yeah, again, not very many points lost there. Just 2 or 3 people who mainly dropped points here.
Yeah, round 3 was probably the worst round from the driver's perspective. We were on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere, and pretty much 4 minutes of nothing.
Yep, I looked it up earlier, and it's about 13 to 14 kilometers to make it into the next town,
Mm.
which, on a straight road with decent movement would be possible. Through a windy road in the middle of the forest, not so much. I'd be curious actually if anyone has even made it to the town.
Mhm.
Um, but even if you do, there's not actually very great signs in the town itself, at least not from the few places I've looked at afterwards. So even if you had like spent 3 minutes and 50 just to get to that town, you probably still wouldn't have found it and probably would have just been even more annoying. A
Mhm.
few people did get reasonably close. The landscape sort of gave you about a, let's call it 3 to 400 kilometer window, north or south, where you probably are. Um, and that way, a few people got decent scores there. But overall, you see a lot between like almost no points all the way up to about 4,000 points there.
Mhm. Yeah, round 4 saw us head to the far south of Chile in Puerto Williams, which is pretty unique in its own little geography and look and feel. So wasn't that big of a difficult round at all.
Yeah, it's on a massive island which has exactly one small town. Um, and yeah, there were plenty of signs within the village as well, or city. I don't actually know which it would be. It has an airport. We could probably call it a city.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, not a lot of problems for everyone except Ordbocker, who sort of gave away his pretty much secured. Well, yeah, it would have actually been no, it would have been fourth place. Never mind. But yeah, he gave away his massive amount of points in that round.
Mm. Bit unfortunate there. And then round five saw us head to the complete opposite end of the country, far north, dry and dusty roads, but not too far from the intersection of the 25 and the 5. We also had a very nice sign pointing us to within 7 kilometers of Maria Elena, which made it pretty easy to find as well.
Yeah, very easy round to find in general. Again, I'm not sure if you went south, how much you would have actually found there, but looking at the drivers, I don't think there was a single person who, played the round seriously that was further than like 20 kilometers or 25 kilometers away. Um, Pretty difficult to pinpoint exactly because there's 0 points of reference on a pretty long straight road, but a few people managed to get the 5K regardless.
Not bad. Yeah, so a couple of tricky rounds means if we take a look at these total feature race results, nobody getting a perfect game, no one even getting over 24,000. Moist Flubber gets his first podium of the season in 23,986. Boxer, though, despite not getting his usual high score, is still in the podium in second, and Mr. Blue also makes an appearance, 23,512 for him. A couple other names in those points here this week. Quite a few Americans. Barry Fishy Berryzander and Carp towards the bottom there. Orpheus, kind of Box's biggest competitor, way down in 10th, so not the best week for him. Calamity, you didn't have the best weeks. 18th for you, 20,158. And yeah, people like Hidekmi, Wakelock, and Pizanico pretty much giving up towards the end of that game, just looking for a better start to the sprint race in the next week.
Yeah, and essentially, with the exception of, I'm gonna say, I think it's three people. This result is entirely determined by round three.
Mm.
Um, and these three people are Ordboka, Solar Sensei, and M. Wickham, who actually had decent round threes, but lost their games in other rounds, where pretty much no one else made any mistakes. So, bit unfortunate for them. Overall, I think even through that, I don't want to call it a random round because you did have a pretty decent indication based on landscape, but no actual information.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Not the most surprising results overall. Yeah, I think relatively standard, even I would say.
Not too bad. Let's switch over to that sprint race, and we were in the capital of Santiago. And here are our layouts. Everybody had the same 5 locations, but of course they're a different order. So the order we have here is the order that Calamity played them in. Round one saw us next to a pretty big park, the Park O'Higgins. What didn't quite look like that exactly at the actual spot, though.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of tell by the sign that says, "Hey, Park O'Higgins," but it partially it's because the time the coverage was taken wasn't really a time where the park would really come out in like a vibrant form. It's just kind of, it looks very dry and unappealing.
Mm.
um and also there's the fact that if you're zoomed out to like a level where you normally expect like the biggest POIs to show up, and where you can also see like, hey, there's a POI for Park Inés de Suárez, there's Park Quinta Normal, there's Park de los Reyes, and like 7 other parks. This park doesn't actually show up because it's
Mm.
blocked by this city name. So I didn't find it. I
Yeah,
think I don't know in what direction I went. I feel like though I saw mountains towards the east relatively quickly,
mm,
and I was like, okay, if there's mountains to the east, we got to be somewhere in the sort of southeast maybe of the city, but no, dead center.
yeah. Yeah, heading east was the way to go. The 5 was not too far away, as well as a metro stop. So quite a few good clues could have been found going that way. Round two saw us head just off the little river there, in kind of the northwest corner of the town, you might want to call it, not too far from a couple of major intersections, and next to a so-called stadium. What didn't really look like a stadium either.
Yeah, not really. I couldn't see any stadium in the round. You can
Mm,
see a stadium now if you look at it on satellite view. Um, I guess it's just been built up since then,
mm,
because it looks quite different now on satellite view than it looks when you go into street view. You also couldn't really see the river very well because the banking kind of blocked the view. And once you made it past that, you saw like a very small stream that I would hesitate to call a river, um, which also didn't make it any easier to be like, hey, because there is only really one big river going through Santiago. So
mm,
if you'd recognized it as a river, it would have been a fairly easy location to find. But if you didn't, then you wouldn't have. And there was a few more possible clues. If you went to the east, you crossed a railway track. But again, on the Google Maps, there's only actually one railway, like one track to see, and in Street View, it looks a lot bigger. So even that wasn't the most straightforward clue. And in the end, I kind of just I got a bit lucky that I was even like 400 meters away.
mm,
Um, but yeah, overall, again, a pretty tricky round.
yeah. Yeah, it kind of shows you that what you see on the ground doesn't always look like it does on the map. Like, oh, there should be a river
Mm.
close by. There should be this kind of this POI. I don't see any of that. What's going on? This can't be the right location. And then, yeah, so it can be a bit tricky. Round three saw us kind of head to the west eastern side of the country. Sorry, in one of the little
City as
suburbs.
well.
So yeah, probably in terms of not like the finding the location, but just kind of narrowing down what little street you were on could be a little bit tricky in this one.
Yeah, from here on out, I actually had a pretty easy time for the rest of the 3 rounds.
Mm,
I don't even. I think we from the start you see a sign that's like, hey, well, at least there's a statue there that says Sucre, and there's also road signs right at the start that are like, hey, Avenida Sucre is this way, and so on. And Avenida Sucre isn't too difficult to find. It's in the district of Santiago that's called Plaza Sucre. So yep. Apart from that, very easy to pinpoint this one. I don't actually remember. It's been a week pretty much by this point. Um, what exactly I found that made me find the right place in the end, but I think it was just Avenida Sucre.
yeah. Yeah, the major road is named that and it's on a V intersection. So that's a pretty unique thing to be able to spot on the map as you're looking at all those small roads. Just look for that unique shape. Stands out quite well. Round four was another one that we didn't really have to move to find out where you were, but unless you knew where it was a little bit tricky. We were up
Mm.
next to the Hippodrome of Chile, in the kind of northern part of the city. And yeah, it didn't stand out too far on a zoom level, but it was a pretty good place to at least start from in your pinpointing.
Yeah, I think again I don't I don't even remember why or how I found this one either, but I think it was with the main road going north and south, Avenida Firmin
Mm,
Vivazzetta, that I found in the end. I didn't see the Hippodromo until like pretty 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 much just already being there, because again it's blocked by something else because apparently the gas station 14 de la Fama is much more important than the Hippodromo. um, yeah, but again, not the most difficult to find. You can uh, kind of just make your way to a bigger road relatively easily, as long as you don't go in the complete wrong direction, and then you just got to look for them.
mhm. And then round five saw us pretty much downtown, in the dense city center of the city.
Yeah, that one actually took me surprisingly long to find. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Okay, yeah, we're in the central part of the city,
Mm,
but it it did take me almost all of my time, like 2 minutes and 22, because again, it's kind of like there's a big green square in the map.
mhm,
If you look far south enough, I was kind of for most of the time I was looking like just 100 meters or so further north, a bit more central. But it again doesn't really look like much of a park when you actually look at it in street view. Like it's a
mm,
bit green, sure, but not what I think of when I see like a big green space on the map. Um, but in the end, yeah, you kind of just go around. There also weren't that many street signs around there, so you kind of had to look around a bit to find some that would actually tell you which street you're on.
Hmm. Yeah, we're not too far from the Palace of the President, and it was the Plaza de la Constitution. So, yeah, pretty major government area. But doesn't mean it stands out well on a map,
Yeah.
unfortunately, for that one. Let's see how our drivers did in this one. And yeah, unlike Chile, Santiago was pretty nice. And we got a very interesting from last place in the feature race to first place in the sprint race. Hidekmi had a very nice performance, 21 meters away with his 25K. But as we see here, Calamity, the top 9 players all getting 25K. Xander, the only one sneaking in with 24.8 into that final points place. We see you there having a couple of bad rounds at the beginning there in 18th for that one. Yeah, Wakelock and Wickholm Pizanico didn't have a good week on either of their races. But again, Boxa, no matter what we throw at this guy, he always takes one of those podium places. And this time finishing third. And we'll get into it in a bit, but that his teammate in second, Barry Fishy Bear, finally putting up some good points to help out Oberhausen as a team.
Yeah, Barry, he's already had a pretty decent week last week in the US, but that obviously being his home country gave him a bit of an advantage there. But also here in Chile, a fantastic week from him. Colin a bit disappointing for sure, who was in like a clear second place in the overall standings until this week, picking up no points in either race, and therefore, fallen behind Box a lot. Headache Me, definitely a fantastic performance from him. His actually he had 1 point before
Yeah,
this week, and now
one
he's
point.
got 26. That's very nice for him. A lot of drivers lower down in the standings also picking up quite a few points in the sprint race. Solo Sensei, Ortboka, and Xander, all not with the greatest of seasons so far. Baseman as well, not in the upper half of the table, picking up quite a few points here.
Yeah, we'll take a look at the standings. And after 4 weeks, Boxa keeps his dominant position in place number 128 points, 60 points ahead of his nearest rival. As you said, Colin Ginther there not picking up any points. Doesn't lose that second place position, but is now a lot closer to that pack chasing him, which it looks like already Calamity. It's pretty much going to be a fight for second, as it was last season. Orpheus still also retaining his spot after a couple good starts, but the last week or so hasn't been the kindest to him. And Mr. Blue turning his fortunes around after a rough start from him. He's finally starting to pick up some points, and we see him in fourth with Moist Flubber rounding out the top 5 in that one. Other than that, Calamity, you were in ninth. FGT Racing has not a bad performance at all. Clemens in seventh. But yeah, Max, M the Baseman, even Pluki, somebody we didn't think we as a newcomer we would be that far down the rankings, is in 13th. So
Yeah, Pluki so far really struggled with the sprint races, not picked up a single point in those. So all of his 31 points coming from the feature races. There's actually quite a few drivers like that, not necessarily always just, picking up all the points in the feature race, but also drivers who picked up all their points in the sprint race. Lunacy, Baseman, even Wakelock with his one victory in that sprint race, but also further at the bottom, Solar Sensei and Wickham, all of them picked up all of their points in the sprint races. But then look further up to the top, you kind of see that you can't just pick up points in one of the two modes. You kind of got to do well in both if you want to be fighting for some of the better places. There's a nice little Austrian congregation there from 7th to 9th. I'll see that I can flip that around and, be at the top of that after next week. But yeah, so far, definitely, as you said, Boxer running away with it again. I think it's highly unlikely that anyone will even come close to him till the end of the season, but we're not even halfway through yet, so who knows? Yeah, then Colin, even though he picked up no points at all this week, still holding on to second, just barely. But from then on, it's a very close fight, all the way down to even the lower half of the table, where people can still pick up a lot of points in the coming weeks. just a few of them need a bit more consistency. You can see there Headingme and Wakerlock, who both have already got a win this season, but still down there in 14th and 15th because, well, apart from that win, there's not really been much in the way of points. So if they can get a few more going their way, a few more races, maybe a few more great performances, then they can, catch up as well still.
Mhm. Well, let's take a look at the constructor race and how it's shaping up after 4 weeks. Oberhausen and Nordhagen maintain their 1-2 positions despite Nordhagen not having the best of weeks. Scantrum moves up into third after replacing FGT, which you guys didn't pick up too many points there, Calamity, dropping down to fifth behind Chariot. Other than that, not a whole lot going on for this. Yeah, Chariot moving up, Scantrum moving up a bit, but everybody else pretty much staying where they are. Octane has slipped a little bit. Baumberg with a little bit of a boost, but other than that, not a whole lot going on. And yeah, Lancaster and Orient still towards the bottom. Both Lancaster not picking up any points. Orient picking up some points this week, but not enough to move them out of that bottom spot.
It was a very interesting week for the constructors in the way that you either got a lot of points or like none.
Mm.
Oberhausen with 57 points this week, and even Skanstrom with 38, Chariot with 37. And then at the same time, Nordhagen with a catastrophic week of no points for them at all. Same going for Cape Motorsports and Lancaster, but those are kind of down there in the bottom of the table anyway. But for Nordhagen, that's a catastrophic week and pulls them out of, chasing Oberhausen down into the, middle pack again. Um, Interestingly, as well, I said earlier, Scanstrom with 38, Chariot with 37. Chariot scored all of their 37 points in the feature race.
Mm.
Scanstrom scored 37 of their 38 points in the sprint race. So again, kind of interesting to see drivers and teams specializing in different kind of events here.
Yeah, we are seeing it a bit more this season that drivers, if they have a one or two bad rounds, will just decide, hey, it's not worth it to put a lot of effort into the last one or two. I might as well just take a hit and give myself an extra minute, 30 seconds on my sprint race and hope that helps me out in the points table a little bit. We'll see if that strategy pays off in the long run, but definitely interesting to watch as teams actually start to figure out maybe how to play with some of these rules here in Formula G in its third season. Well, before we take a look at the map for next week, let's take a quick look at Formula G2 and how these reserve drivers are shaping up. Ben Savage, the former organizer of the competition, after not being able to even get out of the garage last week, takes first, and M. Kempe also takes second. Renata having one of her weaker weeks. I say that although her score was still quite good at 21,984. Namco also having a pretty bad week of only 9,000. Obviously, not too familiar with Chile at all. Yeah, DHZ, Connor and Croy's DNSing. Connor and Croy is pretty much out for the rest of the season, I would assume, given they're just haven't played for except for the first week. So for the standings, it actually shakes things up a little bit. Renata still keeps her place at the top, and Amco in second, but Ben moves all the way up into third, pushing down Amco and DHZ with his nice performance there. Yeah, the points total of the people who are consistently playing is still pretty tight. Renata's got a bit of a lead, and we'll need to have a couple of good performances to not lose that too fast. But, as Calamity said, we're still only about, not even halfway through the season, so we don't really have to worry about things too much quite yet. Well, for next week, we are headed to Taiwan, which I don't know. Can we call it an interesting country in the sense that like no country in the world recognizes it as a country, or
Let's not go into that.
yeah, let's not get into geopolitics. This interesting region in the world is really interesting, mainly because it's uses the classical Chinese in terms of the writing style. So if you're even familiar with Chinese, it can be a bit tricky to read when you get in Taiwan. But small island, pretty unique in its geography, though, Calamity.
Yeah, essentially, you've got kind of a similar situation as you have with Japan, but just on a much smaller scale, where obviously most of the population, if not all of it, is around near the coast,
Mhm.
and the middle of the country is I call the country there, yeah. The middle of it is very mountainous, so you've only got a few roads going through there. Overall, it's not the most difficult map to play. Um, there are plenty of good signs available, and the road numbering system is relatively logical and pretty straightforward. And you usually will find enough road signs that you can be like, okay, in 4 minutes, it's pretty much guaranteed that I will find one at least somewhere, so I can just focus on finding those. Um, Although you can just end up in the middle of a very rural area and not find one of those, especially as well in sort of the mountainous roads through the country, where it's pretty easy to tell, hey, I'm around
Yeah.
this area, but if there's like 2 or 3 roads going through the mountains there, then it might be pretty challenging to identify where exactly you are. But that, I guess, that is true for everyone, so we're gonna have to hope that we don't have a round like round 3 in Chile again here, because could definitely be possible. Taipei in and of itself for the sprint race is another pretty interesting one as well, because it actually includes quite a lot of sort of rural areas that
Hmm.
aren't really part of the built up urban center, but are still part of Taipei City, and those out there can be pretty difficult to find and pinpoint in a shorter time limit. Taipei City itself, if you just look at the central part of it, is relatively straightforward. I really like the street signs there. They tell you
Hmm.
exactly, which section of the road you're on, which is pretty cool. Um, and then you just gotta have to find one of the bigger streets and then look for it on the map. I think that's pretty straightforward. The only thing that is a bit different in Taiwan is that generally, most of the time, there will be a zoom level where you'll only see the Chinese writing of the streets on it. So you kind of have to play around a bit, zoom in a bit more, zoom out a bit more to really
Hmm.
see the Latin alphabet, so that you can actually tell where the hell you are. So that is a bit of an annoying point when you're just scrolling through the map and trying to find the right streets, because you can't just scroll at one zoom level. You have to vary it a bit to actually
Hmm.
not overlook any of the bigger streets.
Yeah, Taipei City, really interesting. It includes a national park. I'm not sure why the city boundary goes that far out of the town, but it does. Includes a couple interesting landmarks, National Palace. But if you are out of that built up area, it's pretty obvious where you are in the city. But it will be hard to probably pinpoint because of just the lack of information way out
Mm.
there. Yeah, there is kind of a river going through I would say the southern part of the town, given how big the actual town is, right near the airport. So that could be a thing to spot if you're desperate for some information. Head south, or probably, yeah, south is the best guess, and to see if you can
It's
hit that
actually,
river or something. And
I would
hmm?
say it's. I mean, I get why you'd call it south, but
In the built up area, it's the northern part of the built up
yes,
area, right? But it's in the overall area of the city limits. It's in the southern part of it. So I guess if you're in a built up area, head north. If you're not, head south and see what you can
yeah.
find. That can give you some pretty good clues as well for that. But yeah,
You
so it
can
should be really
also
interesting.
you can also head west either way, wherever you are.
Yeah, yeah. West is another pretty major river, and the coast. Uh, you can hit that as well. Great. Well, best of luck to all our racers in Taiwan, and we will see you next time in week 5. Take care.
Bye.